Alright, so we're back with yet another educational duel video. People were suggesting I do a deck building one, and well, we'll see how this goes. So currently on my right here, it says testing, but this is the deck that I'm currently using with it in my own duels currently. And I figured I would explain my deck just so that way people uh, we get an idea of some of the things that are going through my thought process as I built the deck. So naturally, we have Marine first. Marine is Marine is dated. However, mine, thanks to just how long she's been around, I've been able to get her up to LB 50. And she has like 7 KP attack or something. So basically, if she uses her AS on anyone, so long as they're taking damage, they're basically dead. Also, Marine AS has stun, freeze, and restrict. Nobody resists restrict, or at least nobody that actually gets used in duels has restrict resistance. So even if they had freeze resistance and stun resistance in their deck, realistically they're still eating that AS through the restrict. Like it's just going to happen. Another reason is because she's a very efficient block remover due to the fact of all of her stuff hitting at least 5 times. So I won't get rid of Civ block and some of the others that just have infinite block, but uh, between her AS NS combo, she'll pretty much kill whoever I need her to. So that's pretty valuable. Also, the CC. Also, having multiple target CC for the fact that it does the AoE now, thanks to the buff they gave her way back when on her AS. Realistically, if they didn't give her that buff, I'm not sure I'd be using her right now. But multi-target AoE CC that does 3 different kind of CCs, which basically guarantees that they're getting either frozen, stunned, or restricted. I mean, that's valuable in all situations. You've also got the multi-hit on both skills to get rid of stuff like block. Also good for things like the third map due to the damage cut towers. Up next, we got Ira. Ira just does not care about anything. As our most recent collab outside of the Maple collab, Ira really doesn't care about anything. He gets 7 stacks of Veil, which still is not. It doesn't have any counters yet. Veil just kind of exists. It's essentially the new version of Block. Like when Block first came out, and everybody's like, "Whoa, Block! Block is so broken," which it was at the time because we didn't have the resources slash new characters and whatnot that we do now to realistically get rid of it. But yeah, 7 stacks of Veil, essentially 7 stacks of block. But we have no actual counter to it at the moment. It's just you have to deal with it as you would block, except you can't remove Veil outside of actually attacking. So there's that. So it's just better than block. It's like block 2.0 or maybe 3.0 at this point. Also having debuff lists, so you pretty much can just run people down for like the first 10 seconds of respawn. Very fun and interactive. Definitely, it's just another one of those units that were like only the aiming devs would come up with something like this and be like, this is fine. Uh, Kind of in the similar sense to Marine, she's got multiple AoE hits. She also has knock up, which is the best CC in the game. And people are gonna say, like, out of all the CCs, knock up really. But knock up, quite literally, uh nobody will ever be immune to it. Just by the way of how knockups work. If you ever played like MOBAs or anything that involved knockups as well, you will understand that this is very much so a thing. Knockups are just extremely annoying to deal with. Essentially a stun, but better because there's no immunity to it, and you just kind of have to deal with it. Oh man, people. Oh man, some of the quote unquote higher duelers are not gonna like this pick. I've got a Kari in here, and you know what? It's the deck staple. You know, it's our mascot. It is what it is. Akari just, oh man. If you were to put her in a tier list right now, she would not be very high on it. Reasoning being is that while she is the bomb, uh, she doesn't have invincibility pierce. She doesn't have block pierce. She only has a single attack, and she's 4 cost, so she's relatively expensive. However, she can do things that you need her to do, which is they don't have any defense. You can go ahead and just blow them up, thanks to the fact of being a bomb. But the hybrid nature of Akari is really what I like about it. The fact that uh, her teleportation is extremely troll, and it just for the fun factor alone, for me right there is one thing. Also, the heal is very nice from her, as well as giving regen, as well as removing dots for the most part is pretty good. Uh, but yeah, no, the higher duelers would not be using Akari right now, which is fair enough. But she's always been a staple of our deck since we got her. I originally wanted her way back when they had originally introduced her, and I actually ended up force unlocking her, I believe, at the time. But thankfully, back in my days, you were able to convert people before they actually came out in boxes. Man, those were some good times. Everybody just got Arbo immediately. And then when they finally released Arbo, everybody's like, well, we already got her. And then they gave Arbo out for free after that because they were like, well, what are we going to do at this point? But, oh, yeah. So there's Akari. Basically, I use her to snipe a lot of setup people that people try to use. Uh, a lot of setup people don't have a lot of defensive buffs to them, and their thing about being set up is just for the fact that they can sit back and cause chaos from there. Whereas Kari is just a free way to get in there thanks to the invincibility on drop and take care of them. And if people want to realistically save their setup, they have to use somebody that's relatively built in order to deal with her, and also more than likely have invincibility, peers, or buff removal in general, which most people are not willing to use in order to get rid of Akari. And I'm not saying that's won me duels before, because people just like they see Akari and they're like, "Oh, it's not a problem," until she ends up killing a few people, and then it's like, "Wait a minute." Or reviving somebody essentially from the brink of death, and then all of a sudden maybe I've got a full HP Marine or Lammy or something like that back again. They're like, wait, this is way bigger of a problem than I thought. So Akari just adds a lot of unpredictability, and I like that about it. So it is what it is. We've got our savior here, at least in terms of the scorpion farming. Lammy. Oh man, Lammy's so good. Everybody was sleeping on her when she originally came out. I was like, she's gonna be good. Everybody else was like, nah, man, Lamb is not it. But I was like, I am getting her, and you guys are gonna deal with it. And you're like, all right, so what makes Lammy good here? Well, if you've ever done the scorpion farming, Crystallize is extremely good. Quite literally, nobody in the game is immune to it. So as soon as you hit it, they are crystallized for, I think it's 15 seconds now. 15 seconds of being able to just wail on somebody. They can't do anything to defend themselves. 15 seconds is going to run out like if you just sit there and let the crystallize just wear it down. Like 99% of people's buffs will be gone, and at that point, Lammy will just one-shot them thanks to the way her AS-NS combo works. So the AS applies the Crystallize, which hits both ground and flying, whereas the NS only hits ground. However, the NS, when it hits somebody that's crystallized, does like 300+% more damage. It's pretty much the ASNS combo that will kill every single time. And thanks to her buff, she removed 6 buffs, which buff removal is always good. There's a reason why Frog is as cancer as he is. And Lammy does the same thing in that sense. In Frog removed 6 buffs, so does Lammy. So it's like having another Frog in that regard. And, well, there's a reason why everybody runs Frog on top of everything else. But being able to remove buffs in duels is extremely strong. A lot of people rely on buffs in general in order to make their kit work. So if you're able to remove those, all of a sudden they become far less of an issue. And even if you can't kill them, Lammy crystallizing them for 15 seconds, like if she just crystallizes somebody that's flying because she can't hit them again, due to her NS being ground only, then they just sit there for the 15 seconds and then die anyways. Because if you're getting crystallized for 15 seconds in duels, at least in the tier that I am, you're dead. Like, you're just dead at that point. It is what it is. The chances that you will save a unit that is crystallized before those 15 seconds run out is generally just not going to happen. And most people will generally just leave them for dead because that's basically what they are already. I mean, you can leave them to the point that they get uncrystallized, but it's really not that realistic. Lammy also has Quick, which is beautiful. They used to spam Quick on people a lot, like during the early days of CS, like back in Fire Force and stuff. Like, Quick was the thing. And then for whatever reason, they really started to cut back on Quick. Not that Quick isn't broken in and of itself, but they definitely dialed it back a lot since then. On top of the crystallized, the Quick, she also has the counter armor, which does slow move and a 1-stack drop in physical and magical defense, I think. So essentially, you hit Lammy, then your animations get slowed. You have slow move on you now, which can also combo into Lasharna, because Lasharna, when she hits somebody with Quick, or hits somebody with slow move, will instantly become frozen. So then, between those two, you can have a little bit of a combo right there. A bit of a niche combo, for sure, but it's something that can work. But, yeah, so hitting Lammy, and it's like multiple procs. I think she has 3 at once. So 3 stacks of physical and magical defense down is pretty much going to guarantee at least somebody at this level is going to die, especially when she's level 50. Like, as long as she can do damage to them, like they're not invincible or have Veil or anything like that, they are 100% dead. It just, I don't make the rules, I just work it. Up next, we got Sib. At least in terms of the meta, she's definitely fallen off a bit more. Why is that? Well, because Block Pierce has become, I wouldn't say common, but it's certainly a lot more common than what it used to be. And really, the only thing Sib has in terms of defensive capabilities is block. So if you can get past the block, Sib's kind of just a flying dead chicken. But that's not what Sib's really known for. The offensive capabilities is where it's at. Being able to apply debuffless is beautiful. A lot of people need buffs in order to become useful. So being able to make it so people can't apply said buffs to themselves immediately just kind of ruins them. What you're really looking for is the AS, though. Again, buff removal. She does 3 random ones, I think. You're seeing a theme here with all this buff removal, and that's for a very good reason, because buffs are the name of the game for the most part, at least currently. And the fact that just having buffs is, well, you know, buffs are strong. Buffs are strong. So getting rid of them is even strong. Also, she's multi-hit in terms of her AS. The AS is also AoE, a decent sized AoE, not the largest AoE you'll ever see, but good enough to get you multiple kills with it, which is yet another reason. And of course, ancients are broken thanks to their passive of their special dragon types and whatnot. So, I mean, Sib, I wouldn't say she's necessarily falling off. She's just not like SSS tier or whatnot anymore. Eventually, we might make a tier list, although I'd probably have to have somebody set that up for me. Uh, because mostly because I'm too lazy to make one. So if one was already set up and I could just like drop the characters into place, then maybe we'll make one. But for the time being, that's not what we're here for. So that's the general idea behind Sib, is a ton of buff removal and insta killing thanks to her initial effect, giving her AS essentially double damage. Allows you to pretty much one-shot somebody so long as you can actually apply said damage. You've also got invincibility piercing, which is just beautiful because you always need some form of invincibility piercing, because invincibility units will always be somewhere in the meta. I mean, we can already see right there. Frog has invincibility, and well, any unit that can kill Frog tends to be higher up in the tier list. Again, much like some of the other things, I don't make the rules, I just work. Next up, we have Tarantula. Tarantula over there being level 50. You love to see it. Extremely tanky as a beast for for no real reason. You could throw all of your stats into defense because you don't expect Tarantula to necessarily kill based on its own damage. So if it can eat more attacks for you, then that's what you're looking for. But the real reason you throw Tarantula in is for its AS burning off stacks of blocks, stacks of veil, stacks of really just the idea is just the debilitate people. And Tarantula is quite good at that. Slow is extremely annoying to deal with. Much like quick is very nice to have, slow is very annoying to have, and can potentially get you killed, which we've seen multiple times, both on my end and on other people's ends. So, definitely something to look out for. 5 stacks of poison, too, can burn through units quite quickly, especially if they're running tanks and whatnot. Then the poison just becomes that much more effective. Tarantula pretty tanky just naturally, and then if you build it to be extra bulky, it will easily cover its own cost at 2 cost, which is basically why you would throw Tarantula in there. Getting rid of block, applying max poison, applying slow, and just tanking things for you, along with it being free placement, along with it being a low cost, so that way you can drop it, so that way you can get access to something like Marine or Ira or Lammy or something like that quicker, while actually still being a worthwhile drop. Next up, we have Mamba. Mamba's fallen off a little bit. You could say Mamba's always been falling off a little bit, but that's for a different time. Mamba, instant AS, essentially, with stun, which is great. You've also got bind, I think it is, and slow move. So it's 2 cost insta CC, more or less. Yeah, at 2 cost, pretty much any any unit that's 2 cost is basically playable because it's essentially at the cost of a beast. But it has hero stats because whoever at aiming thought that was a good idea. I don't know why aiming does what it does, but they do what they do, and they make 2 cost heroes like Frog and Mamba, and you just kind of wonder what life is. But yeah, instant AS with CC, multiple CCs at that, so that way you can stun people out. You can also drop her early and pretty much whenever, just for the fact that she's 2 cost. But also hero stats. Unfortunately, she doesn't have a lot of the meta stuff that you're really looking for right now. The AS is AoE, thankfully. Her NS is complete garbage. I'm not sure why they did her like that, but her NS is basically non-existent. You have her AS and well her AS. But power gathering, yeah, power gathering in duels, at least for Mamba, is not a thing. Frog is because Frog is Frog, but for Mamba, yeah, no, good luck with that. Up next, we got Kana there. Kana just well, Kana is Kana. We've got debuffless on the NS that hits multiple times in quite a large area. So being able to burn uh, not even just one target, but multiple targets blocks over a large area is great. And then on top of that, you can also burn Veil. You can also burn people's HP shields. You're also applying debuffless, which is probably the best part of the NS. The multi-hit is really good, but being able to place debuffless, again, being able to keep people's buffs off of them is way stronger than what you think it would be. There's just so many units that require buffs. Like, Sib, again, as we said in the previous video, does not come in with block immediately. So if she runs into a Kana AS trying to get somewhere, she could potentially apply debuff list before Sib actually gets her AS off. And then when Sib goes to use her AS, Sib will get none of the buffs. And you can see how a Sib with no buffs is just a flying chicken that's going to get wrecked. So you can see how that can be quite helpful. And that's not the only unit that doesn't get buffs immediately on drop. So you can see how that could be quite good. Being able to shut down somebody's buffs immediately is quite good. Being able to burn the block, being able to burn the veil, also hitting multiple targets all at the same time is a very good NS for what it is. It does pretty good damage too. But the real thing, what you want there is the AS. The AS does paralysis first, and then it does stop. Quite literally, no one is immune to stop. Again, look at that. A second AS with unavoidable CC. Now we've got cancer like status effect block, which will block that. Status effect block being the newest cancer. And, well, there's really nothing you can do about it because they made it unplay-aroundable. Because even people like Frog that will remove 6 debuffs at once only removes 1 stack of status effect block, no matter how many buffs it should actually remove. Why is that the case? I don't know, because aiming's a big smart. Yeah, that's what we'll call it. Basically, it's just the newest whale buff, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's no playing around it necessarily. It is what it is. Either you kill them or you get killed, which is a 100% fantastic, fun, and interactive way to play the game. But aiming doesn't care about that. They just care about getting whale money. And what perfect way to do that than status effect block? But we're not here for status effect block. We're talking about God. So, yeah, paralysis pretty much to make sure so they can't really fight back immediately. And then you've got stop that will immediately apply after it. Nobody's immune to stop. So unless they have debuffless or invincibility on, that is hitting 100% of the time. Which sets up her AS damage beautifully, because they can't protect themselves. And, I mean, my Kana is not very strong at level 33, because, my big whaling self over here, my LB 33 Kana, woo, big spooky, I know, right? But, yeah, no. Even with that, new collabs are just broken even at 5-star. It kind of just is what it is. We've seen this for quite a while now with aiming and collabs. So, yeah. But the AS is essentially her nuke. Her NS is quite a bit of utility. Not that her AS isn't, but her NS even more so. And, well, yeah, that's another reason why I would pick Ana, is the fact that she has unavoidable statuses. Paralysis, also nice, 50-50 chance of just making it so people can't attack. which can also be spread over multiple targets, just like your NS. So you can also use that as a area of denial. Also, the insta AS, of course, uh, upon dropping, so you could just immediately just time stop people and nuke them as a result. It's pretty good. It's almost in a sense like Almiral in that sense, and the fact of just dropping them and watching them just absolutely explode at everybody within the area. Is mine at that LB level to do that? No, not necessarily. But, when the whales just whale and get her the LB50 immediately, well, you see how that goes. Up next, we got Frog here. I mean, do I honestly need to even say anything about him? Like, I could probably just say he's Frog at this point and we could move on, but for the sake of the video, we'll go ahead and go through it. Frog, straight cancer, probably one of the most cancerous units in the game. I really do not understand. Like, somebody must have been drinking a little too much coke at aiming. I just where do we even start with this unit? All right, so the NS. Ooh, we give quick out at 2 costs because normally throughout CS history up until probably was Suzu 3 cost, up until like Suzu, every person that could give out quick was 4 the 5 cost generally. So this idea coming out with Suzu giving low cost quick enablers became a thing, and Frog does that now. He gives out quick on the NS. He also gets his counter armor and gives the water attack buff, which is extremely niche in duels, granted. However, if you give it on somebody like Lammy and Lammy runs into a fire unit, they will die 100% of the time, so long as Lammy's actually able to damage them. That probably would happen regardless at this level with her LBs. But with the water attack buff, it's basically guaranteed. For the most part. So long as they don't have invincibility or veil or over shields that will take the extra the overkill damage for them and just remove it as a part of the HP shield. But generally speaking, it would kill. But anyways, yeah, so Frog NS, you're looking at that and you're like, oh, that's not too bad. Until you get to the counter armor, which is minus 9 seconds on your AS every 2 seconds. Which in duels basically just means insta AS every 2 seconds. And you're like, oh, yeah, just reading it off of that, you already know what time it is. You're on some BS, that's for sure. And then you're like, all right, this is too bad. But no, AS, power gathering. And you're like, oh, for Mamba, it wasn't that good. And, Mamba's Mamba, and she has an actual AS cooldown, unlike Frog, who every 2 seconds gets the 9-second cooldown, which essentially gives him an insta AS so long as he gets attacked and triggers the counter armor. So every time he spams it, he gets a stack of power gathering, which then increases his AS by a certain percentage that I can't think of off the top of my head. The general idea being the more he uses the AS, the more powerful he gets, is generally the idea there. And you're just going to be constantly seeing it getting spammed. You'll even see it being used on towers, which still triggers the increase in the power gathering, which makes no sense. You think you would have to, at the very least, be hitting enemies with it in order to stack it. But no, you can even stack it on towers. Why is that a thing? Aiming. That's the best way to explain it. That's aiming. But yeah, of course, the AS isn't broken enough yet. So we need to get 6 buff removal, because of course we do. And a lot of those buffs are the very meta buffs. Like invincibility, like block and stuff like that. Just being able to remove all the buffs you hate to see on every enemy, just on one unit that's going to spam the AS every 2 seconds. if not sooner than that. So you can already see how that's a bit of a problem. Not the aiming, of course, because whales are going to absolutely hit the frog box that's up right now. And, when you see all these LB50 frogs, don't be surprised why that happened. Not like we haven't gotten frog boxes like this before, whether that be the ultimate supporting frog boxes or the same box that we had in the past not too long ago. But no, if you don't have a frog and you like dueling, pick up your frog today. There's our shilling for aiming, I guess. Not sponsored by aiming, but if they want to, I suppose I'll take at this rate. But yeah, no, I probably could have just said frog and everybody would have knew what I was talking about there, but here we are. Next up, we got to use the Echo Nut, naturally. I know, very, very original, I'm sure. So Echo Nut, similar to Tarantula in the fact that it removes buffs, but unlike Tarantula, it actually removes, I think it's 3 buffs at level 5 AS, which is, again, buff removal, buff removal, buff removal. It's too good. Being able to remove buffs is just so strong. Especially when a lot of the buffs are pretty cancer in and of themselves. So being able to remove 2 or 3 of those will make your life a million times easier as a result. You've also got the uniqueness in the fact that it does sleep. A sleeping unit can more than likely be a dead unit. And of course, both the AS and the NS, or AoE, you're seeing a lot of AoE everything because that's just the way the world is right now. And really what you want is just AoE everything for the most part. There's very niche situations where you want to have like a single target attacker like Leomine to get rid of niche characters that rely on their ability to reduce damage thanks to their passive. Because some of people like Astros and whatnot, where it's like, I only take 20% of the damage if I get hit by anything that's ground flying attacks. So then you want somebody like Lammy with her NS that only hits ground to just absolutely nuke these guys. Because they really, generally, whenever you have a passive as strong as that, generally the idea is that they're really relying on that to save them. So when you actually defeat the passive in the fact that you use a ground-only attack on somebody that only takes 80% damage, or only takes 20% damage from units that hit both ground and flying, usually their defense is not that great. In which case, you can generally blow them up. Like, Alda Drius has something similar, if not the same. So somebody like Lammy will just absolutely blow them up. But a lot of the others in the deck would have a decently difficult time of getting rid of them. Just due to the fact that the passive is as strong as it is. But thankfully not the case in that regard. But yeah, so AoE buff removal, it's 2 cost, it's free deploy, being able to place it whenever you want. At the cost of 2 is pretty good, especially once you get to the halfway point in the duel. It's basically 1 cost at that point. So you can see how that can be quite effective. Also, just for what it does, being able to strip buffs. And then sleeping somebody, assuming that you have follow-up damage, is basically a kill. And being able to remove those 2 to the 3 buffs can also assist in getting the kill in general. So, Echo Nut, just a fantastic setup. Could take a few hits, definitely not as much as Tarantula there, but can still do what it needs to do. Realistically, Nut is for when you need to remove buffs that the Tarantula wouldn't. Like Tarantula, you'd probably prefer to use on people that have a ton of block and whatnot, due to the fact that their AS hits like 5 times, so you can get rid of 5 block or so. Whereas Echo Nut could in theory, get rid of all the block because I believe it's at random. But that's also at random, which means you could not get it, where the Tarantula is more or less guaranteed to get at least some of the block off. It depends on how quickly they kill it, of course. But LB50, you can more or less expect it to do what you need it to do there. So that's the general idea behind this deck. Alright, and you already know the complaint that's coming. But I don't have all these collabs. I'm just like a guy. We're like, alright. So you know what? We'll go ahead and take care of units that people probably don't have in their deck as of the moment. We'll make it for general use here, just to give people an idea of what a deck that they might build at this point. Now, obviously, this is a little more subjective in the fact that people that are watching the video are going to be all over the place in terms of where they are in duels. Some people are going to be in the 2800s. Some of the people could be grandmasters. Some of them could just be starting out. So it's not going to apply to everybody. And well, I mean, for one video, it's just you can only cover so much, right? So we'll just get into it. So I mean, the current frog box is up right now. So if you want to make that argument, sure, throw frog in there. Frog, straight cancer. We already been over this. So we're going to leave collabs out of this for the sake of the fact that they're collabs. We're going to leave out the Scorpion, which I will be putting in my real deck at some point because mine is broken. Steel Scorpion's generally pretty good in general, but you know, just having a rainbow bordered Scorpion at LB50 just makes life so much easier. But we're gonna forget that exists for the time being. So we're just going to look through some of the units right now. Sib, I mean, pretty much everybody has Sib at this point. So definitely a worthwhile character to throw in there. We've already explained Sib earlier, so we can generally just take what I said earlier and apply that for reasoning as to why you'd have them in the deck. Kari is sadly very niche, so yeah, we already also went over her in my actual deck, so we won't go over her again. Tarantula, we've explained that earlier. Tarantula, I would generally suggest for just about every deck, just due to its overall effectiveness in quite a few situations. So Tarantula, I would generally suggest in every deck due to just its being as good as it is. A viable candidate we see here is Abiz. Abizu is pretty nice. The NS has more range than it should, and then you have the AS, which is your real meal ticket there, is the fact that, of course, you got the pull into damage, and if you kill people, it reduces the cooldown on the AS by, 5 seconds, I believe? Which, of course, in duels, your AS time is cut in half. So that pretty much, if you kill a unit, and pretty much guaranteed if you kill 2 units, she is just going to be spamming her AS. Nobody is immune to pull, unless they're, like, inside of their AS or whatever. It's, like, a very niche situation when it happens. But realistically, nobody's immune to pull. So long as they step into her AoE range, they are going to get pulled and get rained down on. She also has the extra damage to flying units, which I think is on both of the skills. It might just be on the NS or AS. But the general idea is that you do extra damage to flying units by like 50%, which can very much so be the difference between a kill and somebody living. So she can work relatively well against somebody like Priya, so long as the invincibility drops by the time you do it. She does relatively good at taking off the block of Sib, as well as if Sib doesn't have block up at the time and Abizu's hitting her with her bonus damage against flying, she's basically dead. So Abizu definitely a viable character to be using in your deck. Some general weaknesses is that she doesn't have block pierce, she doesn't have invincibility pierce, her actual defensive capabilities are quite low, and the fact that she doesn't have invincibility or block or veil or anything like that herself. Very much so, I'm going to do damage and chain kills, and if I can't do either of those, I'm dead. But if I can do that, it's going to be an absolute menace. Thankfully, her AS is on a relatively short cooldown. She also has natural quick in her kit in order to be able to pull that off a little bit easier. Her AS also does multi-hit and AoE. So while not as strong as something like Marine, where she's got multi-hit AoE on both of her skills, still viable. I wouldn't say she's in the toppest tiers just due to the fact that her defensive nature is basically not there. And that's one of the things you'll notice in the higher level duels is the fact that at some point everybody's hitting LB50, in which case everybody's killing everybody, so your damage starts to matter less and less, and your ability to survive through things starts to matter more and more, where it's a little bit of a reverse in the lower levels. Being able to just kill things is like what you're looking for. And then once you get to the higher tiers of duel and like the highest tiers of duel, keeping your units alive is what becomes top priority instead, due to the fact of the one-shotting nature. It's just kind of how that goes. Alta Mobby, she did get her buff. She is usable. She's not top tier. I could probably put her within range of a Bizu. Her NS does 6 hits now, so that's relatively good on the third map in terms of being able to burn towers. She has damage cut and debuffless on drop, so you can just drop her in front of somebody. She's going to instantly use her AS. And if somebody doesn't have block removal, or buff removal, I should say, then they're going to get wrecked. Ultimabi AS also has the added effect now, thanks to the buff, that when she gets a kill, she gets cooldown reduction on the kill. So, in a sense, it's like a Bizu in that sense, and the fact that she will chain kills. You also have the added effect of getting the heal off. And if you're chaining kills, then you're going to keep using the AS. The AS is going to keep going off so long as you're getting the kills. And you're also going to be healing at the time you do it, as well as applying the defensive buffs that she gives. It's like +2 stacks, I believe, for everybody. So, not bad. Would I have her in my deck right now? I mean, not with my current team, but if you put her in the deck, I wouldn't necessarily meme you on it, especially if you're in the lower tiers or ladders or whatever you want to call it. Oh, excuse me. Of the of the CI of the CS dual hierarchy, I guess I could say, in terms of the ranking. Oh yeah, she has block pierce now, I think, as well. So you can actually, like, if you're doing it on drop, you could actually, in theory at least, depending on whether Sib's buff removal hits the right buffs or not, you could realistically use her to block Sib and then actually straight up kill her with a mobby if you're doing it on drop. So, a potential Sib counter. You could also get screwed over by the fact that the Sib AS will take your damage cut, and then all of a sudden you're taking Sib damage. But Amabi is, unlike Sib, is actually a bit more tanky. Even though the stats look the same, Amabi just has a little bit more of a defensive nature in terms of her heal as well as her buffs that she'll get off the AS as well. So between the heal and the extra like 2 stacks of defensive buffs, she should more or less live, but also you have to factor in things like how built yours is versus how built their Sib is, and so long and so forth. So a mod, Ultra Mobby, usable. Not first choice, but definitely usable. I mean, Lit is so old meta. Like, it's not. I mean, if you really want to, she's definitely not first pick. She's definitely not second pick. But you could use Lit. It's just it's old meta. Gotta. There's quite literally no reason to use Gotta at this point. Like, using Gotta is just not what you do. Zero defensive capabilities. You don't have insta AS. It's just, why would you at this point? Outside of, oh, I like her. Which, fair enough. If you want to use her like that, that's fine. Not my recommendation, but there you are. Priya. Oh, man. Priya for the first, like, 2 or 3 years of this game. So much more usable. Even after her buff right now, it's like invincibility and quick on drop. So she might get you what she's always done, which is get the one kill that you're looking for, and then she'll die off. At this point, at least for somewhere where I'm at, where you need to get a kill and ideally keep going after that, she just doesn't necessarily fit that bill. Still absolutely viable in the lower tiers of duels, and the fact that uh, being able to kill one unit and then dying is more viable, which just brings her up slightly higher in that regard for the fact that she's able to do that. Uh, does I mean, she's got good damage, she's got the quick, so it's pretty much guaranteed the kill so long as you're not like dropping her on a unit with like block or invincibility or something like that, of course. But Priya could still do Priya things. She's just not the bomb that she used to be, that's all. But you can put her in the deck just fine. Wouldn't be too crazy, but it's still viable. Lash Crowder buff, I don't remember 100% of everything that's going on now. She has like counter armor now. She has poison, which is only one stack, and people are gonna be like, why even put it on her if she only gets one stack off of it? Well, her AS hits 3 times, so it's actually more like 3. There's also the reason of so that way you burn off other people's status effect block. That gives her essentially an extra stack removing of status effect block. But actually it doesn't, because status effect block covers all the buffs. So if she was gonna apply slow move anyways, then it would have removed the block anyway. Yeah, I'm not really sure. Thinking about it at that point, I'm not really sure why the poison's there. I mean, I guess if you get hit by all three, it's three stacks of poison on everybody that gets hit, essentially. So a little bit more burn damage while they're frozen. Lasharna, you could throw her in the deck and not feel too bad about it. That's pretty much always been the way that Lasharna's been. If her passive actually does take place in duels, then everybody in water gets a little bit of an attack boost and a defense boost, I think. So there's a little bit of something there. You got good AoE coverage. If people, I think it's either slow move or frozen that her NS does bonus damage to them. I've never really used Lash like that. I see people use Lash like that, and that's the times when I have somebody like Akari and then just drop her on Lash, and then they just get big sad because they're like, well, there goes my Lasharna. And some people really play around their deck with Lasharna. I don't really understand that. But maybe that's just the lower duels way of thinking, is that making Lasharda your masterpiece is going to be the way to go. And well, you're at the higher tiers. Yeah, no, not the case. As there's really no point in using legendaries at this point. 6 cost is way too costly. Her range is not as good as what it used to be, and the fact that everybody's range has just gotten that much better. So her ability to outrange people is far more limited than what it used to be. It used to be able to just like pick people off with her. But with more invincibility and block and Veil being introduced, Her ability to kill people has gone down quite tremendously. At 6 costs, far too expensive. So I would not suggest using her. But if you're in the far lower tiers of stuff where stuff like legendaries appeal to you, then I'm not going to stop anybody from using their units that they want to use. I'm just saying that there's certainly better units than others. Mamba, we already explained. Kana, we said we're not doing collabs, and we are also already explained. Reamer at 4 cost is almost in a sense like Priya in the fact that he'll generally get the kill and then die right after, just due to the fact that he doesn't have any defensive buffs. So this man is free to get nuked by just about every attack. You do have the light attack buff going for you, so if you do happen to run into a dark enemy, you will kill. Like 99% of the time, especially as built as mine is. That being said, though, you can't really get rid of block. You don't get any bonuses from hitting invincibility units. And your quick is basically limited to your AS and one shot from your NS, and that's it. And, well, that's really not that great at this point. Can you use him? Yeah, he would probably be like a 3rd round pick, if anything. But, I mean, if you want to use him now, there's still use cases for him. But there's just better. I mean, if you want an invincibility pierce, why would you not just go for somebody like Sib? I mean, she costs 1 more, but does far more, in which case Reamer kind of just gets outclassed in that regard. Sib also has the light attack buff, so Sib essentially just replaced Reamer, is what it is. The twins. Oh, man, the twins are kind of in a weird spot, and that's mostly due to the status effect block. I still haven't tested out the interaction between that, but I believe, at least the way I see it going, is that status effect block is actually going to block their buff steal, which is their whole gimmick, is being able to steal buffs, and then using those buffs to then turn around and kill the person who had said buffs, using their own buffs against them, quite literally, as I believe it's the AS does more damage for each buff that you steal. But twins are not bad. You could realistically throw twins in the deck and not feel too bad about it. Again, they have something that, at least my main deck that I use, is buff removal. Not even buff removal, but buff removal and buff steal. But you also have the cancer that is status effect block now. I still haven't tested out that interaction between the two. So realistically, my guess is that status effect block actually stops the buff steal. In which case, if it does that, twins definitely fall lower on the list. But thankfully, status effect block is still relatively new for the time being. Therefore, twins are still alright. They have initial quick now, thanks to the buff that they got. For things like the 3rd tower, it's pretty good in the fact that they will chase down enemy targets. Not that you can't bait them like we seen in our last video. But you can also have them go after people that you wouldn't necessarily have been able to otherwise, thanks to the fact that the AI does what it does, in the fact that it chases down actual people rather than trying to do damage to the towers. So definitely still usable. They do a surprisingly good amount of damage, especially when they steal a ton of buffs. They do way more damage than you think they would. They also don't get played all that often, so you have the initial surprise of why did that do so much damage as one of your good units actually ends up dying off. So there is a bit of a surprise factor in the fact that if you don't run into twins all that often, you may underestimate the damage and lose units for it. We got Karen. I'm not really going to explain tanks because at one point we were in a tank meta and became a realistic thing. And then we just became a damage meta where like we're just going to blow up everything regardless. I mean, if you'd I mean, I guess if your Karen's built enough, you could play Karen just for the fact that she'll give you quick and defensive buffs and stuff like that. At 4 cost, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but people would still probably play Karen, and uh, you can make it work. It's just not. It's just a weird thing to revolve your deck around, but you can make it work. Altadrius is pretty good. His passive is very strong in the fact that you reduce uh, is it range damage or it's ground flying attacks? It's something along those lines. But realistically, a majority of your attacks are going to be damage reduced by 80%, which is extremely strong. You've also got the counter on Adrius that allows him to cross rivers, which can be good for the second map. He's got a stun. He can hit flying units thanks to his counter. He's Origin. He's also multi-hit. He's also a physical attacker, which is starting to mean less in duels now, but physical attackers generally seem to do better against towers. That might just be an observation on my end, but I feel like whenever somebody like Lammy hits a tower, it just hits different than somebody like Sib hitting tower. There might be something to that, but yeah. Sib Sib can get wrecked by Altadrius, but after Sib's buff, Sib can also wreck Altadrius. It's kind of just like if you guys are built to the same level, then it's more 50-50 than you think it should be. Just due to the fact that his counter is basically made for flying. So not exactly sure why it is, but also aiming just really loves Sib, so there's that. But yeah, Altadrius, you could realistically even now still put him in your deck and feel not too bad to it for it, especially he's got a little bit of an AoE to his NS, so that way you can hit potentially multiple targets as well as the AS, which does a knock up as well as multiple hits. So between those two things, plus his passive being extremely strong, you could realistically throw him in your deck at the moment and be fine about it. Oh boy. Oh Misa. Oh boy. Yeah, just know. Sabe's gonna be Sabe's gonna be salty hearing that, but just know. Outside of if you're gonna use her in like a meme deck, there's like no real reason you should ever be using her. At 7 cost, she's too expensive. The gimmick of your opponent losing SP for killing the clones, assuming they can shut down the real one that's spawning the clones, is just not strong enough to realistically justify the 7 cost. And well, if you place down Misa and they immediately nuke you, and all of a sudden you're down a 7 cost, you're in a very bad situation, if not already losing the game. So there's that. Not much to be said there. I would not recommend Misa by any means. And incoming hate comments from all the Misa Sims. But I said what I said. Angie is still usable. You can realistically put her in the deck and find it alright. She doesn't have block pierce, though she does get rid of block relatively quickly thanks to her buff that gave her quick on just about everything that she does. So a quick DPS, it definitely doesn't hurt. The fact that she's multi-hit, single target is a thing. She'll also change targets when she kills something, which is something I don't know if I could say is relatively new now, but you have people like her and Lucky that will do that, where you kill an enemy and they will change targets even in the middle of using their skill, which is a good change. It's rather annoying when it's on your end and it happens to you, but it is a good change overall and definitely something that need to happen. Otherwise, you could just burn people's ASs and then run over the unit accordingly. But yeah, Angie, she's got Wraith Fiend, so People can kill themselves on towers. Uh, Her AS also does a lot of damage. It's also on a very low cooldown for what it is. It does good damage. Her NS does some pretty good damage as well. Basically, quick 24/7. Of course, naturally, anybody that's ever used Angie knows that she is extremely fragile. In the fact that she has basically no HP. With LBs, you could start to make up for it a little bit, but she's always just going to naturally have a lower HP pool than quite a majority of the other characters in CS. So very much so in that sense, a glass cannon. She can do what you need her to do, but she's not a unit that's going to like solo win you the game. Not going to use Ira naturally because we already talked about that. Norn. Norn had his phase. He's phased out at this point. He doesn't have enough defensive buffs to keep him alive, and he doesn't do enough damage to realistically be used at a 4 cost. So Norn had his time in the sun, and well, now he's just chilling in the shade. Pelico you could absolutely throw into this deck right now. Pelico is just extremely annoying in the fact that you just build 88 DR on the thing, and then it gives itself its own DR buffs and whatnot, as well as leaving behind the death rattle and the fact that it will spawn another baby one. It'll die the one hit, but you could still absorb people's ASs and stuff like that, which is really all you use Pelico for. So it does its job, and it does it very well. Realistically, you could go into this deck and put Pelico into it, and you'd be just fine. And you know, I mean, at 1 cost, you quite literally can't go wrong. Borodin, much like a lot of the others, kind of just suffers from being a I don't know if Boro was ever really considered meta. He really didn't get buffs like that until later. But Borodin, definitely a bit more of a PvE character, but you can use him PvP, at least at the lower tiers of duels. Much like our other people, he doesn't have the defensive buffs that you're looking for like the highest tier of duels in order to keep him alive. His damage is not the greatest. His utility is very nice with his AS. The fact that he can cover white areas with a knock-up, paralyze, as well as do damage to multiple targets at the same time. But at the end of the day, his NS is only single target, and the NS is not very strong at that. So, you can use Borodin. I wouldn't necessarily suggest it, but I mean, if you have him, you can use him. Aqualily, so Aqualily, absolutely usable in the deck still. Status effect block, I believe, does work on Mir, which hinders her quite a bit because the Mir buff is pretty nice. You get a good amount of attack increase as well as decreasing the enemy attack as well as their defense, while also increasing your defense. So just for being a buffing bot, that's not too bad, as well as her AS is an AoE hit that does like 800% or something. So realistically, if you're going to use all Lily at this point, you're going to use her to have enemies kill themselves on tower, which absolutely does happen even still. You can wipe out people like Sib and stuff like that as a result of it. I've seen plenty of times where Sib will kill herself on a tower, Arbo will do it, Adrius could do it, Angie could absolutely get herself killed on tower. So just for that fact alone, I mean, if you get an enemy to kill themselves on tower, sure, they end up doing the tower damage, but also you ended up killing a unit just by all Lily existing, not even including her own damage at all. So, like, still in that case, usable. However, a lot of the top meta stuff will either have status effect block naturally, which kind of just screws over all Lily, because while I haven't seen the interaction myself, I imagine it goes along the lines of it's just going to block the debuffing mirror portion of her AS. in which case enemies won't be killing themselves on tower, which takes away from that. Generally, a lot of the top people have some level of healing in order to keep themselves going. So the reflection damage is more or less negated because it's only like 10%. So that's not the most fantastic. You can still get yourself killed on tower. It's just that due to how tanky they are. But it's definitely not what the debuff used to be. Like release Alt Lily was just gross. You just place Alt Lily and then watch it. Your opponent just kill themselves trying to take towers. And well, usually those units that are trying to take towers can be 5 cost plus potentially. So quite good in that regard. So all Lily you could realistically throw in the deck right now, not feel too bad about it. Pad a meme unit, I mean, especially with status effect block now, kind of just screws over Pad. You can still use her in the second deck. You can even use her in the or in the second map and the third map and still find some use to her. I mean, sleep is extremely annoying, and then she doesn't do damage, so then the sleep will stay there for like 30 seconds or something, which can be really annoying. And then you have the AS for the para. Para is 50-50 coin flip chance there, so sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't in that regard. At 4 cost, I wouldn't recommend it. Realistically, you could throw her in the deck and not feel too bad about it, but I wouldn't suggest it. Veronica, man, talk about some meta units that have just fallen off completely. CS doesn't like summoners at this point. I really don't know what changed in that regard. We had times where Veronica, Myril, Zonyul were all things. And, well, they kind of just disappeared. I mean, I guess we have Algarard as our newest summoner, but realistically, he does far more damage than these guys will. They buff Veronica, so her Skellies get defensive buffs on her AS, as well as the skeletons themselves have invincibility pierce. At this point, skeletons are not tanky enough to do what they need to do. Only giving them invincibility piercing was a joke in terms of a buff. And, well, they just die off too quickly, and at 5 cost, you just can't. I just can't. As much as I used Veronica uh, and loved summoners for what they are, it just doesn't work anymore. At least not these summoners. Allguard is definitely usable, but that's because he's a far newer unit. He's got block and stuff like that for defensive capabilities. He's just better in every way at this point. Oh boy, Alt Sophia. All right, so Alt Sophia got a buff. She's got quick. If she misses her AS, she gets quick. She's got the initial effect as well as an HP shield, so she's relatively tanky, can live through quite a bit thanks to all of the maxed out defensive buffs she receives. Her NS hits a line rather than a single target. And her AS can do up to like 1,000 damage, I think, at a I think they might have buffed it up to 30% or 20% chance. She can also give herself invincibility, so absolutely you could throw her into the deck right now. She's not going to be a first round pick, but realistically you could put her in her deck and find uses for it. Her NS hits enough for the fact that she can remove block. Not the best, but it is a line attack, so she could take on multiple opponents at the same time, which is a thing, and her AS is also AoE. But it's also only a single hit, so stuff like a single stack of block will be fine. A single stack of veil, invincibility. She doesn't have any invincibility clear, so there's reasons why she isn't a top pick. But realistically, you could throw her into the deck here and be all right. Gil, even at 4 costs, there's no real reason to use him. Petrify is annoying, and if you have somebody in front of Gil, and then Gil just goes over there and continues to petrify spam everybody, then maybe you can find that usable. Realistically, he doesn't have a lot of HP. He doesn't have the defensive buffs. Uh, he doesn't really clear block like that. He can't deal with invincibility. Uh, his damage itself right now, until he gets his buff, is not very good. At least in terms of a dual sense. So overall, even at a 4 cost, I still wouldn't really recommend him. Can you make him work? If you throw like a tanky enough unit in front of him so that way he can heal them also while petrifying people, maybe that's a lot of points to ride on, because presumably the person in front of him is also going to be 4 or 5 points. So you're like investing 9 points into this strategy, which is rather hit or miss, which it just doesn't work at this point. Yeah, you could try it, and it might work at the lower tiers of dueling, but like if you were gonna take this into like grandmasters right now or something, people would just be laughing at you, rightfully so. But that's just the way that grandmaster duels is. Martha, I mean, does anybody use Martha besides Selkit at this point? At least in terms of duels. I mean, Martha is Martha. The AS doesn't do any damage. She doesn't have any defensive buffs. The offensive buffs are meh. The NS is very slow. The AS is very slow. Just no real reason to realistically use Martha. If you want to use her a part of her meme deck or whatever, then there you go. But I can't necessarily recommend that one. Next up, we have Lom. Lom is you can use Lom, but realistically, he doesn't have the damage that our other uh, people do. Uh, he doesn't. He doesn't really have defensive buffs like that. The AS can kill people. It does hit relatively hard. But at a 4 cost, there's a lot of other 4 cost and even 3 costs that I would rather use them Lom. You can throw them in the deck, and well, if you want to play around having Lom in your deck and be that guy, be fallen, then you could be that guy. But that's not me. We already talked about Echo Nut. Larry at 3 cost. Larry at 3 cost, you could realistically throw in the deck. At 3 cost, it's like right there in the middle of it's a little costly, but if you get like a kill or something with Larry, immediately she will become worthwhile to use at that point. Uh, her AS has a deceptively long range. It's also multi-hit. It also does restrict, which nobody that actually gets used in dual resist at this point. So there still is use for that. Of course, Larry is naturally known for not having that much HP, as well as not being very tanky. She does do damage. She does do damage. That is something. And at 3 cost, you could throw her in there. Is she a first round pick? No. Is she a second round pick? No. She's like a third round pick, but you can throw her in there. Pion, I mean, he is a collab, but I feel like enough people have Pion that we could realistically throw him in the should we use him or not in the dual deck, due to the fact that he was in the sense like our earlier Earth things that they've given us in collabs. 4 HP bars. You've got the shackles, so you can get rid of status effect block. You've got the provoke potentially. You've got 4 HP shields. Like at 3 cost, he'll pretty much pay for himself in the fact that he'll just survive long enough thanks to the HP shields. If there was a tank I was gonna suggest in duels, I guess it would be him or you know the other one. the other one that we call a tank that's not actually a tank, but yeah. So Pion, you could throw him in the deck. Uh, is mostly going to pay for himself and his own cost. Is he going to take towers? No. Is he going to kill people? No. But he's also tank, so you're not really expecting that. So if you're going to throw Pion on the deck, on the freaking deck, it's going to be because you want stall and potentially like block and veil removal, which has some value to it. But he's not somebody I'd put very high up into the tier list here. Rollout support quakers are a thing in the past when you can have somebody like Suzu or Frog. There's just no realistic reason why you would use Rollo as a result. When you can just get quick for cheaper as well as units that actually do damage. So there's no reason you should be using Rollo. But I'm sure the lowest tiers of duel people will still be using her and trying to use strats from years ago using her. But, I can't not recommend enough. Emmett at 5 costs, there's no reason to. Which, like, rip to Emmett, but Emmett's not that good. Oh, good. I have a AS that does charm and paralysis. Well, quite a few people still run charm resistance anyway, so there goes your charm. So realistically, you're paying 5 cost to more or less apply paralysis to somebody. Because Emmett really doesn't do damage like that. She could be relatively tanky and potentially annoying through the AS. But if the charm is removed and you're just applying para, you're essentially paying 5 cost to apply para to somebody, which is just not worth it at this point. Oh my roll. Well, as we already saw in the last video, straight cancer, absolutely. If you're gonna put her in the deck, you could throw her over. You could throw her over Arbo. You could throw her over Sib. You could throw her over the Twins. You could throw her over all the Drias. Out of all the characters in the deck we have so far, in terms of real characters and not beasts, she could replace any of them because all my role is fair and balanced. We've already more or less explained all my role and what she does in the original video that we did, so we won't go ahead and go over it here. I don't remember this buff, but also I never really used All Mimi like that. All Mimi at 3 cost. That's usable, especially on the third map, in order to just take towers. You've also got Bind, which is something people aren't as used to anymore as what they used to be when All Mimi was more of a meta pick at the time. So definitely usable at 3 cost. She's not a first round pick, she's not a second round pick, but you can realistically use her if you need the burn, like the third tower map or the third map towers. You can make that happen. You've also got Bind to get rid of some of the annoying physical attackers or the melee attackers, and the fact that they're just going to sit there bound and die that way. So usable, not somebody I would necessarily have in my deck, but you could throw her in the deck and it wouldn't be so troll. Emily, there's a reason why she was in our 2800 Cope deck. If you ever seen any of our videos where we were using Emily in our 2800 meme deck, even back then it was a meme, so it's even more of a meme now. Her damage is not really there, as we'd seen in the videos before. If you haven't seen them, we sat there and did like, 3 or 4 AS at the time, and she couldn't even take a tower. Now, mine's obviously not the most built one, even at 38, but it was pretty pathetic, I will say that much. Just watching like 3 AS go off and not even take a tower. So, use it at your own risk. If you want to be that guy and build a meme deck, then, here's a here's a meme unit for you. But, yeah. Our middle, similar to the Rolo situation, except slightly better. Some people will probably fight me on saying that, but being able to apply invincibility and quick, I would say over cooldown reduction and quick within duels is probably better due to the fact that invincibility can become more clutch. Also, our middle spams his AS for his invincibility in duels, thanks to his cooldown. So there is that. At 5 cost, though, there's no reason you should realistically be using him. Some people, I'm sure, will still try and end up using him anyways, but there's no real reason. Ellie buffers are a meme. I don't even think their passive takes place in duels. So, yeah, literally no reason to use Ellie buffers. Quite literally no reason to use Ellie buffers in duels. Gerard. Alright, so Gerard was a past meta where setup was a thing. Yeah, we don't do setup anymore. We just blow people up. Like, that's just what we do. It doesn't matter what rank at this point. Everybody just gets blown up, so there's no reason to have a guard around trying to buff people up that are just going to get nuked the next second later. So, at least in terms of regular guard, no realistic reason as to why you should. 4 cost also for a buffer slash debuffer, way too expensive when he doesn't do any damage. Dear boy, you know, Nori would kill me if I didn't allow him for use in the deck. And, well, you know, he actually still is usable in the deck. The having block pierce is very nice. You have the initial effect where I think more or less just like doubles his damage on use, so you can just run people over with him. Assuming that he actually does enough damage to kill, which of course relies on how built your Endario is versus somebody else's unit that you're trying to run over with them. But block pierce is nice. You've got the initial effect boost. He does have quick on himself, I believe, or maybe that might be a part of the initial effect boost. You can throw him in your deck and not feel too bad about it. He can cross rivers, so he does work on the second map, although I think Noria said that he can't actually cross the river by like 1 meter or something. I'm not sure. I think you can go at it from a diagonal from like the bridge, but I don't think you can straight up cross river. Just due to a random range issue that they never really addressed. But yeah, 4 cost, you can realistically throw in Dario in the deck, thanks to the fact that the AI really sucks at tracking movement in duels for whatever reason. So when people just run around like some crazy fool with their head cut off, uh, the AI kind of freaks out because it's like, what's going on here? Which can absolutely be to your advantage. And then you've got the fact that he's got the block pierce. Block pierce is absolutely a fantastic thing to have, though I think it's a part of his initial effect, so it will fall off at some point if that is the case. But really, if you're going to use Endario at this point, it's to run people over immediately. And, well, you know, if you trade a 4 for a 5, you're still up a point. And you got rid of a potential threat early. And Endario can absolutely chain kills. He doesn't get the cooldown reduction bonuses that others get, or at least I don't think he does. I haven't really checked on him like that lately. But yeah, he doesn't, as far as I'm aware, have the cooldown reduction buffs for when he kills people. So he'll run people over, and after that first initial running over, he kind of falls off in terms of what he's going to do there, but sometimes that's good enough. And at a 4 cost, if you're trading a 4 for a 4 or a 5 for a 5, that could be worthwhile. So you can throw them in the deck and not feel too bad about it and be alright. Moga, okay, so you know, you've got your resist specific people. Petrify is not meta at this point, so there's no real reason to do it, especially at 6 cost. If Petrify ever becomes the meta stat the meta status effect block, or the meta status effect being used in duels, then it's going to be a very strange meta. We'll say that much, especially considering the lack of units that actually do petrify, much less meta units that do petrify. So that would definitely be a very weird niche situation. But if that did end up being the case, well, then you can throw Moga in. Certainly not the case right now. I don't really see that being the case anytime soon. But there's an option for you. Estella at 3 cost. Alright, Estella at 3 cost. Melee. You do have the Daybreak buff, which is unique in the fact that you get like 150% of your magical defense. Still weak to physical attackers, naturally, already being magic and not getting the defensive buffs that you would be getting from Daybreak if it did both. But it only does magical defense as far as I remember. Stella at 3 cost. 3 cost tends to be the cutoff point between a little too expensive or usable. So at that point, it really just depends on how built your Estella is. If your Estella is, LB50 or whatever, 666, and then you're like, I want to run her as a 3 cost. You know what? Go right ahead. Sure, why not? Especially if we're talking about like mid tier duels, then by all means you could throw her in there. If she's like low build, I wouldn't use her. If she's like average build, I would still have second thoughts about it, but you could still realistically use her. She doesn't put out the most insane amount of damage, but she's also 3 costs, so there is that. All Rufus, I really don't understand why this man's 6 costs. I'm pretty sure the only reasoning for that is the fact that he gives the light attack buff. But is that a real reason to make him a 6 cost in duels? Absolutely not. No reason to use all Rufus in duels outside of him, unless you want to make like a meme deck out of it. But is it really going to be that memey of a meme deck if you can't even get your units out because of how expensive the characters in your deck are? No, probably not so much. All right, Isaiah. Isaiah can absolutely go in the deck, and people are going to be like, but she's 6 cost. But yeah, well, units with confusion exist, mostly by the name of Chifu. That is a 2 cost that inflicts confusion, which can get your 5 cost units killed as a result of it by them attacking you, or potentially losing towers and all that other good stuff. So Isaiah being able to stop all that nonsense and its tracks immediately is worthwhile as a slot in your deck. However, you just hope that you don't actually pull her in duels, uh, because she's going to be a dead weight in your hand for quite a bit. If not the entirety of the duel, because otherwise, or the free that slot in your hand, it's going to be a 6 cost, which is, that hurts. Hestia is Hestia's there for the memes. You get like an 8% increase, I think, in your magical and physical attack for having her in the deck at 4 cost. Hestia's a meme. If you want to use Hestia for a meme deck, go right ahead. Realistically, in any deck that you're trying to win, I would not use Hestia, which is insane to think of for a collab, but it is what it is. Miria can absolutely go in the deck, similar to Isaiah. Charm is still a viable status effect, uh, and people can prey upon that. And people using stuff like Shaltir and whatnot that can take advantage of it. However, if you got Miria in there, then it more or less shuts down characters that use Charm like that, like Emmett and Shaltir and whatnot. And, they become beyond easier to deal with. And that's generally worthwhile enough of a reason to have something like Charm Resistance in. It's just a more meta status effect than something like Moga's Petrify Resistance. So, if you're really running into a lot of people using Charm, and you're just having like a bad night or whatever and getting wrecked by charm, then go ahead and throw Myria in there, and maybe your life will become a little bit easier. Ah, Slav. Oh man, Slav is such a meme. Oh yeah, my what was her thing? It's like magic attack down resistance or something. Absolutely zero reason for you to use Slav. There's just no reason. Oh no, my magic or physical attack went down. However, will I move on? Oh, I just won't care. That's basically what that is. Baron used to be a 5 cost, but they buffed him down to 3 cost. At 3 cost, you could put him in the deck, but he's still going to be niche. And why is he niche? Because he removes specific buffs that I can't remember every buff off the top of my head that he does. But I know he does invincibility removal for one, and I think block as well. So if you just need to get rid of buffs, then you can throw down Baron. He also has things like Curse, which can get people killed thanks to the reflect damage of Curse. He also has the knockup in his NS, which is also a bomb. Baron's a bit of a strange one. I remember pulling him originally, like when his first box came out, and then I just never really got to use it, especially because my gear at the time was pretty much spent, so I wasn't able to get his 6-star gear quickly. So and he was stuck at 5-star. So at 5-star and no 6-star gear, like it just wasn't really happening. But if you're just really lacking in buff removal, at 3 cost, it could become usable. If they end up killing themselves on the tower thanks to Curse, then the man's more than likely paid for himself in that regard. If removing those buffs means you end up getting a kill, that's something that be uh, something to take into account as well. He's not a first round pick, he's not a second round pick, but if you really need the niche, then well, Baron's there for it. Philo at 5-star. There's no reason. With the amount of buff removal and whatnot there is in the game at the moment, you're never gonna stack those buffs up, especially without quick. So there's just no reason to use her. Jala at 4, pretty much the same thing uh, as Philo, and the fact that you're just never gonna get those buffs off. Pretty sure you don't have initial AS either, so you're not gonna get the your AS off essentially ever. There's no reason to use Jala. Vaughn, at least you could make an argument for, and you're like, but how? If I've been forecast here, these two basically do the same thing, which is true to a certain degree. However, Vaughn does buff removal. You also got regen and quick. He also has the initial cooldown, so you'll get that immediately. So it's like a 4 cost Baron, except his is more AoE, can remove. I don't remember how many buffs it does. I want to say it's 3 with like 6-star gear. So there's a use for it. You could put it in the deck. I wouldn't suggest putting it in the deck, but you could put it in the deck, and at least for somebody like me, I could look at that, especially in the lower tiers of Duel, and I'd be like, okay, that's not necessarily a troll character for throwing it into your deck. Buff removal is extremely strong. Having the movement buff is kind of nice. It helps out your slower characters, although a lot of the meta characters are already pretty Sanic as is, so the movement buff is not necessarily needed. Also, the movement buff can also screw you over a bit more due to the fact that your own characters might run up quicker than what you can actually do to reinforce them, so they don't immediately die, so that way they aren't the lamb to the slaughter. But that was less of a worry back in the time where Vaughn was actually more meta than anything. And that was probably more so due to the buff removal in terms of getting rid of people like Benny and Arbo's block and whatnot. But you could throw Vaughn in there if you want. It's not necessarily troll, but Malma, I don't understand why Malma is 4-star. So Malma's an Ellie buffer, but wasn't Yuri like 6 cost? And then Mal was 4 cost, so the inconsistency between Ellie buffers is weird. Also, it just doesn't really matter that she gives you one stack of recovery, especially in duels, is very much so who cares. And then the chances that your very niche wind attack buff or defense buff comes in handy is it's just it's never really gonna happen. And then at 4 costs, it's far too high. Hal pretty much the same situation as Rolo and stuff and whatnot, just too expensive for quick when you can get people like Frog for 2 cost and give it all the units you need regardless. So it's hard. Interesting. I've never seen him used in duels. Not that I would expect to see him in duels at the ranks that we're at. At 3 cost, I just don't know enough about him, but I just on a gut instinct, I would say it's probably not worth it. Now Scarard's 4 cost. Yeah, but I mean, same explanation as something like Yuri or Malma or whatever. The chances that the fire attack buff and fire defense buff make that much of a difference that your 4 cost investment into somebody that's already a 5 cost investment, so you're already looking at more than likely a 9 cost investment to have this very extremely niche situation play out is just not worth it due to the fact that it is as rare of a occurrence as it is. Uh, our Tokyo Revenge dude here at 4 cost, I mean, he's a tank, don't really care. Regular Myroll, summoners are out, and summoners are basically just dead, unless you're all guard, in which case, yeah, at least have some use to you. You can put all guard into your deck and you'd be relatively alright. And not feel too bad about it, just due to how much the initial damage he does with the summons do, as well as the summons just being relatively tanky as is and annoying to deal with. So you make the argument for having all guard in your deck. Somebody like Myroll, absolutely not. Myroll is basically always been the worst of the summoners. When you think of Veronica and Zonli and stuff like that, Myroll was always worse than those two. If you want to say Ballora was a thing, she was never a thing. Like, you just kind of sweep Ballora under the rug and forget that she exists. Because you should. Because there's no reason otherwise. Niccolo is a 4-star, similar to the Scorad and everybody else. Astros at 5 cost. At 5 cost, I can't recommend him. He would be like 2nd or 3rd round pick. The idea being the fact that at 5 cost, he just doesn't do enough. The one thing saving him from not even being in the deck in and of itself is the fact that he takes 80% damage reduction from flying attacks. So you can only really nuke him if you're using ground-only attacks, which thankfully somebody like Glamping covers. But if you don't have that coverage of the ground stuff and you have a build Astros running at you, it can be kind of spooky. In that regard, I could say you could throw him into the deck, though I still wouldn't necessarily recommend him as a dual unit. Trying to recommend units into the deck is hard, right? Because when all you ever play against is GMs and you're like, oh, there's Oki, there's Mikey and stuff like that, and all the other collabs they're running through, right? Like, it's hard to recommend units for quote unquote regular duels. So kind of hard to say. Axion, a curse res. Nobody really uses curse like that. Nobody's really ever really used curse like that outside of when people would try and use solve. So there's no real reason for that. So I want to put him in the deck. Holland at 3-star. I suppose there's a use for it. It doesn't really have the damage like that. Doesn't have pierce. Doesn't have block pierce. At 3 cost, it's usable, but definitely like a third round pick. Kato, there's just no real reason. The only thing you're really looking for is the freeze out of him. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't have Insta AS. So more than likely you're not getting that anyways. I guess if your Kato's built like that, maybe you could use him if you like really wanted to. But realistically, for a normal person, Kato's just not going to be worthwhile. Roro over here. You can, I mean, kind of like Miria and our other status effect resistors. There's a use for it if Freeze ever becomes meta yet again. Then having her in your deck will screw over people like Lasharna and whatnot from being able to freeze you in place and just nuking you. Also works for people like Alt Reamer and stuff like that. But they're really not in the meta at the moment, so kind of a situational one. If they're in the meta, you can throw her in there, and you're gonna have a lot better time. If they're not in the meta, you can leave her out, and well, you really won't notice the difference. Valiant is straight cancer. They call him a debuffer. It's gross. But he does true damage, essentially through burn, ghastly flame, and all that other good stuff. So why they call him a debuffer when he essentially more or less does true damage through debuffs, I don't know. So you could still use Valiant in the deck. Would I put him over anybody necessarily in here? Okay then. Well, okay then. I guess CS is just going to randomly drop. Right. But yeah, Valiant, restrict, nobody really resists that. He's more or less got true damage. You can realistically still use Valiant and not too feel too bad about it. At 4-star, if he trades, it's worthwhile enough. He can also shut down some relatively annoying characters. Uh, he can also resist, or he can also restrict people long enough for you to be able to clean up units as a result of it. So you can throw him in your deck. I wouldn't even consider it a meme usage, but he doesn't have the defensive buffs that you're looking for. Uh, he doesn't do enough immediate damage to be able to be like, oh yeah, this is guy that I'm gonna be using immediately. There's that. Yeah. Well, let's get back into our deck here. Oh man, I'm running out of characters I actually own to talk about that we realistically using duels here. So, uh, well, I guess Lottie's first. Lottie, no realistic reason to use her. A debuffer, I mean, she does get DI runes. Blind, kind of like paralysis, 50-50 chance on whether it actually works out for you. So half the time, even if you land it, it's still not going to do that much. She does have the buff removal, which puts her slightly higher. But still, realistically, at a 5 cost, there's no real reason that you should be using her. Win at 4 cost, no real reason. I mean, if you're gonna put Win in the deck, you would just use the Bizu, at least dual wise. Alfred, no real reason. 1 stack regen is a joke. The defensive buffs can be easily removed, and just generally you're going to get blown up anyway, so there's no real point. Lena at 3 cost. Oh, good. Another 1 save would kill me off. Lena, I mean, unless you're saved, you're not using Lena. I mean, it is what it is. Do I need to say more than that? Garston at 4. At 4, it's usable. I wouldn't necessarily run to him immediately, but Garston is usable at 4. Similar in a sense to all Mimi and the fact that you can just infinitely bind somebody to death. Not that melee units are really a thing currently at this point. I mean, maybe like alt Misa and stuff, but they also have stuff like status effect block and debuff list and what like damage cut as well. I think so. Uh, actually, defensively prepared melee units. But Garston, I mean, I guess if you really wanted the buff removal in your deck, there's him, but realistically, there's so many more better meta options in that regard, stuff like Frog and whatnot, that you would just use them instead, and then Frog's even cheaper than Garston, twice as cheap. So why would you not just use him instead? H-Ava, well, human avatar, if you have Crystal Weapon, immediately just goes into the deck. Because that's just straight cancer. I don't even know why they did that, but they've also liked HF for quite some time. So if you have Crystal Weapon, he goes in the deck. If you don't have Crystal Weapon, then he's not in it, even at 3 cost. But if you have Crystal Weapon, he's absolutely in the deck because then he just turns into a DPS and gets the buff to where he only takes like 25% of the damage that he would be taking or something like that. He also gets a knockup on his AS, I believe. And the provoke is like 30 seconds as well as like got a ton of range. So, yeah, if you have Crystal Weapon, he goes into the deck. If not, he's out. Killian, much like Kato, except actually worse because Kato was actually like almost twice as cheap as Killian here, so no realistic reason to use him. At a 5 cost, absolutely not. You don't get any access to any DI. So realistically, at that point, you're looking for them to kill themselves on their on your towers, thanks to curse and whatnot. There's just no realistic reason to use them there. Now, Foxcove's a meme at this point. If you use Foxcove like year one, that would have been hilarious. Because you could have used her on somebody like Gata at that point. All of a sudden, you would have had a second Gata in your deck thanks to the transformation skill that still I don't think any other unit in the game has. So, an interesting unit. Uh, Maybe in the lower tiers of deal. Well, I'm talking like way lower tiers. Uh, yeah, maybe you can make a Fox Cub work, but that's not really happening. Jewel Tour. Oh man, talking about metas of old. Yeah, no, Jewel Tour just not really a thing. At 2 cost, I mean, at 2 cost, you could throw it in the deck. I mean, either way is still gross, even if it's not on solo. The damage or the attunement it does to your stats in terms of lowering them can be quite a bit and only gets worse the longer your character stays alive. So, I mean, you could make the argument to have Jewel Tor in the deck and it wouldn't be necessarily the worst. I mean, would I use a Jewel Tor over somebody like Echo Nut or Tarantula or Pelico? No, not necessarily. But I suppose if you have a Jewel Tor and you have extra room, then, well, I suppose you can make that argument. Lily, even at 3 cost, no, just she doesn't do enough damage. She's not defensively capable. Her range is generally lower than quite a lot of the meta, even the non-meta. Like she just doesn't have that much range. She is 3 cost, but there's 3 costs that are better. Palin, paralysis resistance. Paralysis never been really that relevant in duels. Like it shows up, like don't get me wrong, like it's not like petrify or whatever. But you're not really too concerned about paralysis when you can still win the 50-50 more often than not. So there's that. Beating 10's a meme. I guess if you really want to crystallize on somebody for 1 cost, I mean, if it gets you the kill as a result of putting them in a crystallized state, then there you go. But realistically, I would just rather use something like Pelico over it. Lev, I mean, Lev is a thing, I guess. She's relatively slow, but I guess if you get a kill, then you get quick and stuff. Lev's usable, definitely not the top pick, but at 5 cost, man, it's still rough. But thankfully, she has buffs like doing a lot of burn damage, having good AoE in terms of her NS and her AS. So you could use Lev and not feel too bad about it. But I want to throw her in the deck over the characters we have here. Did it reset our people that we had in here? Uh, Alright, whatever. We had the generals set up before that happened. Uh, Alright, so Giava, quite literally revolves around whether the other person has Isaiah in their deck or not. If the other person has Isaiah in your deck, absolutely worthless 5 cost. If they don't have Isaiah in the deck, then the best you can hope for is you confuse somebody and they get you a tower or a kill on somebody else that's 5 cost. In that sense, they pay for themselves and the fact that you got rid of a 5 cost for a 5 cost. But even then, you only break even and you didn't necessarily kill your target. Now, maybe you could make the argument that you do end up killing the target after the confusion, in which case I guess you could say it's worth it. But the fact that you're already relying on somebody not having Isaiah in the deck when confusion is relevant as it is, thanks to people like Chifu, uh, yeah. Marine got buffed. You can throw Marine in the deck just fine. As long as you have her built. Uh, she has damage cut now. She's got the special effect of freezing people within the general area and whatnot now. I don't 100% remember her buff, but you can realistically use her. Rasbol at 4 cost, not really using tanks like that. And if you were going to use a tank, why would you not just use Pion at 3 cost or Karen at 4 cost and just get way better uh, benefits out of it than using someone like Rasbol? Snake is 2 cost, just wait until Alt Snake comes out and use Alt Snake instead. I mean, enough said right there. Mag here is at 4 cost. All he's gonna do is you're gonna drop him into the duels. He's gonna do Zayas, and he's gonna die while he's doing his Zayas if you don't put him back far enough. Even if you do, he's gonna run up and get himself killed. Unless you're maybe somebody like Drake's, in which case maybe you can make that work out. For the average person, just generally not worth it. Miro at 5 cost is just gonna get outranged by everything at this point and die. So, I mean, if yours is built enough, I guess if you want to go on to the third map and hope you get an AS off, you would take a tower extremely quickly. I would give it that. But other than that, realistically, no really real reason to use Miro here. We've got Aang here at 3 cost. If you're going to use Aang, you may as well just use Valiant, because at least Valiant has the potential to get you the kill, even at low LBs. Aang, I mean, if you get high enough LBs, your stats can carry you. But realistically, you should just use Valiant over Aang. Milcost is a meme at this point. Invincibility Pierce exists. Flying units exist. And nobody's ever going to let you use that AS again now that people know how to counter things like that. So no realistic reason to use them. But I'm sure people can make a use of it. Mozu at 3 cost. Extremely slow. Can do damage. Doesn't have any of the pierces that you would realistically want. If you want to make the argument for using her because she's a 3 cost and you built her up relatively high thanks to the Christmas event, you can make that argument. Otherwise, I would realistically say I probably want to be using her. Ricardo is not buffed yet, so he is a meme unit. Even at 3 cost, do not use him. Now is just not worth it at 4 cost. I mean, there's just better tanks, so why would you? Wu Jing at 5 cost is it just no. Like like most people, I'm sure already don't even have him built. On top of that, so no realistic reason to use Wu Jing. Bernica, unless you're Bernica simp, there's no reason you would use Bernica. I mean, do I even need to say more than that? Baji, similar to the Wu Jing, most people probably don't have him built. And then even then, his attacks are relatively strange. And I'm pretty sure he generally relies on charm, which again, if people have Miria in the deck, doesn't he won't really be doing anything. So there's that. Rocco's got no range. They have no pierce of any kinds, and even through their defensive buffs, they're still gonna get killed because they're like a nat 1 star or 2 star, so their stats just don't really match up to where you need them to be. Smirnoff, similar to the Giava. If somebody has Isaiah in their deck, basically useless. Uh, if they happen to not have confusion resistance in their deck, the best you can hope for is like an even trade, and that's about it. Zonk's a relic of the past. His range used to be a thing people would be the craziest about, but most people can match his range at this point and just do better damage. And Zonk is really slow, so there's that. So Kong, much like Wu Jing and the other guy there, no real reason to use him. I make my use him other than that, but Bogus at 3 cost, it just there's other tanks that do more than him and better at even 1 more cost. And I would still really have somebody like Karen or Pion over somebody like Bog. So there's that. Garrett, well, rip the Cora, but Garrett's a meme. He doesn't have Pierce, so if somebody just runs invincibility or block or something like that, you're just gonna watch as Garrett does essentially nothing and gets wrecked. Canes, the only realistic reason I could think of using Canes is on the 3rd map, but that would still also require you to keep her alive throughout the duration of her AS, which good luck to that. And if they manage to kill you, you used a 5 cost there. Adrius at 4 star. I mean, he's a melee unit, and he doesn't have the buffs needed to be a melee unit in the times that we are to keep himself alive. So, no real reason to use him over somebody else. I mean, if I was going to use a 4 cost physical attacker, I'd still rather use Long because he's, I want to say, slightly tankier, anyways. And I think he has Insta AS. I mean, Adrius does have quick on AS and NS, I believe, so that's kind of nice. He also has like the chasing AI that somebody like Norn has, which can screw up the AI a bit, but other than that, not too crazy. Armin, I mean, unless you're an Armin sim, realistically, no reason to use it. You would just use Lucky instead. Irene, just, again, confusion, a thing. If Isaiah's in there, Irene not really doing anything. They also don't really have range like that, so you're just going to get out of range. And if they have confusion res, basically useless. Another quicker at 5 cost, no thanks. Kayla did get a buff, and is actually usable now, even at 5 cost, thanks to her buff. You could realistically throw her in this deck here. We'll just take out Lammy there for the sake of we're not having collabs in there, even though our deck was already more or less set up earlier. But yeah, you could realistically throw Kayla into this deck and be alright. Galga, no realistic reason to use him. Melee attacker. Quick curse doesn't really matter at this point. You're just going to get blown up. Dwarf Avatar at 3 cost, just no. Deela, the only reason you would use them is for the CC. And if you're just going to have a CC bot at 4 cost, unless you're Q Doggy, ain't happening. Folk with stun res, much like Miria. If stun is a big issue for you, then you can throw Folk in there and get rid of it. If it becomes a meta thing, more meta than what it already is, then you can throw them in there and not have to deal with it. Otherwise, if stun it is not a big thing for you, then don't worry about it. Molly at 3 is just memes. There's nothing to say here. Molly is just a meme. Metro is usable thanks to the CC they gave him with all the buffs. He also has invincibility. You could realistically put him in the deck and not feel too bad about it at 4 cost. Because even if people end up being stun resistant, he can still land the confusion. If they have Isaiah in there and they happen to be stun resistant, well, you're invincible anyway, so you don't have to worry about it. So, relatively usable. I'm pretty sure he has Insta AS. So if you just want to drop him on somebody to do free damage if they don't have invincibility pierce, then well, there's a ticket for you to do that. Woo over here. Alright, you may as well just. There's too many other better wind attackers, not even considering collabs, but there's too many better wind attackers, much like what we have right down here, Eava. You know, regular Eava without crystal weapon, I don't know. Eava with crystal weapon and at 3 cost, oh yeah, absolutely. You would just, yeah, you wouldn't even think about it. You would just go that, throw them in the deck, and watch the chaos unfold. Amelia has provoke resistance. Never really been a thing in duels like that, so you don't have to worry about that. If it ever becomes a thing, it's never going to become a thing, let's be real. So, Ralph at 3 cost, supposedly he's getting a buff, although I believe it was his alt form. Ralph at a 3 cost tank in his regular form, just no real reason. Canal at 6, if blind becomes a thing, I mean, I guess if you're getting wrecked by ninjas, then go ahead. Other than that, there's no real reason. This guy also does stun resistance, so I guess if you wanted to have him in the deck instead of Folk, there you go. All Canal, if she's built, it can be a freeze bot. And she can take towers decently well due to the fact that she does increase damage to gimmicks. If she's built enough, of course. Otherwise, realistically, she's just there for a CC bot in terms of freezing multiple targets. Unless the other person has freeze resistance in which case she's basically neutralized herself. But it is what it is. Mig is a 3 cost tank, no thanks. Roddy at 5-star. Apparently, Roddy gets a buff at some point. I don't remember exactly what it was. Until he gets his buff, I want to use him. There's just other invisible characters like Alkanes and Ninja that just do it better, so why would you use Roddy at that point? Pollux, yet again, another tank. Gando is silence resistance. I mean, it's still better than petrification resistance, but realistically, it's just, why would you? Lud at 3 cost. I mean, I guess you get a fear on her death. Original Lud was much better than reworked Lud, but it is what it is. Those times have come and gone. Lud has no range, so you want to use her anyways, even after rework. So, Albin and Zorb are 6 cost, and they don't really do anything. You can make more of a case for Albin in the fact that he has invincibility piercing over Zorb, but realistically, you're not using either. Alfaro at 3 cost. With Alfaro's buffs and him being at 3 cost, you can absolutely throw him in the deck here. Like, we'll just assume that, like, Eava doesn't have his crystal weapon there. Otherwise, you would keep him in there over Alfaro. But you have insta kill now, 50% chance. So unless somebody has an HP over shield, they're going to die from it 50% of the time. And if you don't land the kill, you get power gathering, which power gathering is gross. I mean, there's a reason why Kayla has it. There's a reason why Frog has it. There's a reason why Meat, uh, Amabi Mamba, there we go, has it because it's just gross. And at 3 cost, you can make that. Mimi at 5 cost. I mean, why not just use Lev instead? Oh, Ava, good jokes. Surveying, good jokes. Too long of an AS, not enough attack. Galley at 5 cost. I mean, outside of the screwing with the AI, there's no real reason to use him over somebody like Amarita and whatnot. We've got Zhao here. I mean, unless you're Gore, you're not really using him, so. Pommel at 7 cost is just not usable. Askro at 4 cost, there's better tanks. Dylan, unless you're beaming, you want to really use him. I guess he can cross rivers, but other than that. Calamity at 4 cost is usable, although he doesn't have the block pierce, so anybody that has block, he's just gonna suffer through. You can make a use case for him, but realistically, he's not getting used. Bustle at 3 cost. Somebody can make an argument for him at 3 cost. He does have what? Invincibility Pierce now, and he has the Dark Attack buff. So realistically, you could kill people with him. You also debuff yourself, though it does get the effects get better as you level up the skills. They don't last as long and whatnot, but you're still debuffing yourself in duels, so that's already spooky enough to begin with. Time Lizard, there's people that just use stop that are just better than him, and if you're gonna do it for the stop, you may as well do that. Rambled at 7, good jokes. Trick, the only reason why you're using Trick is for confusion. And again, Isaiah just kind of screws that over anyway. So unless they're not running Isaiah, you could use Trick, but even then, he does blind to the enemy, which can screw you over yet again anyways. So I'm not too sure why you would use Trick, but Marbus, good jokes. Itsuki, her time was past. We used to have the memes of just setting up Itsuki back in the setup meta, and well, if you're there, if you know, you know. A quicker at 4 costs that goes invisible. It's just not enough. Fields or Fits here. Fits at 3 costs. Like unless you're Arc, you're not really using Fits at that point. He does do damage now, especially on his counter. But other than that, realistically, there's just better 3 cost. Audi, rip the car. I mean, does anything need to be said? Nobody uses Audi at this point. Patton, there's just better summoners, and summoners are out anyways. Mile is a buffer, and their buffs are not as good as Gerard, so if you were going to use a buffer, just use Gerard. Tad at 3 cost. I mean, the only reason you would use him is for the petrification. At 3 cost, which you can make an argument for, but I still want to use him. Golkin at 4 cost. I mean, there's just better tanks. Poke, yeah, that good jokes, good jokes. Lizard Ava at 3 cost. Don't make me laugh. Zomli, summoners are out. Rufus did get another buff. I guess if you're Rufus's Bell, you can make an argument for it. Realistically, I haven't seen a Rufus since pretty much the time that his meta ended, which was extremely early in the game. We're talking like when 50-50 boxes existed between like Zonk and Lily and Rufus and Indario and whatnot. So we're talking way back in the day. You can make an argument for Rufus thanks to his bust, but realistically, you're not using him. Gizar, that's good jokes. Dracu, unless you're Q, there's no reason you'd use him. Because nobody really has him built like that. Even then, his flying status is conditional. Kiryu, the only reason for him existing is taking towers quickly. And there's just others that do that, but better than him. Felix, if you're going to use a bomb, you dark bomb at that, you may as well just use Akari over Felix. That's all I'm saying. Mela, there's just no reason. There's too much fire DPS that's better and has more range and does more damage and all that good stuff. Yerville, same situation except for wind. Usagumo, you could throw Usagumo into the deck at 4 cost. Invincibility, counter armor, quick, does a ton of bleed quickly. You could throw Usagumo into the deck and not feel bad about it. I mean, you just replace one of your characters here. Gargogo, yeah, good jokes. Even his alt form, still not using. Baz at 6 costs is an absolute joke. Why even CS? Shuck, nah, I think I'm good. Amabi has paralysis resistance, so I mean, I guess if you wanted to use her over Palin in your deck, not that you're gonna be dropping any of them. There you go. There's an option. Alvaro got buffed. Realistically, you could throw her into the deck at this point. I don't remember absolutely everything she does because it was like reading out of the CS Bible of what she actually does. And it's only a 1 in 3 chance of doing like 3 different things. So I don't remember everything that goes along with it. All I know is Alvaro is a gimmick, even to yourself. And well, if you want consistently reliable things, then I wouldn't pick Alvaro. But if you want the unpredictability of Alvaro, I could see that appeal too. And realistically, you could throw her into the deck based on her buffs. But I like the consistency, and Alvaro just doesn't give that. So I probably wouldn't throw her in my deck. But if you want to, it's not the worst. Baby, that's a good joke. Yeah, a stun on like a 1,000,000-second cooldown. No, thank you. Gyarados 6 cost. I mean, if you had him, Bill, maybe you could make the argument, but at 6 cost, nah. Bell, we'll consider him collab and just skip it. Carl, no reason, because he's Earth. I mean, enough said, am I right? Reftalia is just from meta duels of old, and that's just not happening. Paw is, there's just, Frog does everything he does, but better, so why? Solivan is just AoE fire that isn't even that strong in comparison to others that we have, so why? Solvic 7 cost, don't make me laugh. Olga, again, Isaiah just kind of screws her over, so if there's an Isaiah in there, then Olga's screwed. And, well, if they don't have them, I guess you can make more of an argument for Olga than some of the other confusers we've seen. But 5 costs just to confuse people unless she's getting kills out of it. You're using a 5 cost to confuse people. Not fantastic. Aliens, don't make me laugh. Sandug, don't make me laugh. Novar, at 3 cost, if you have him built, you can make the argument for him thanks to things like lifesteal, and I think he has an overshield now. If he's built like that, you can make the argument. I would imagine most people realistically don't have him built like that. So, just go with the no on that one. Kalia, if you're Mordred, then you can use her. And, well, enough said. But, no, I mean, you can use Kalia realistically. If you have her built, you could trade out somebody. She removes block and a few other things. I don't entirely remember her kit, But realistically, you could throw her in here over somebody like Arvo or a Metro or like Alfaro or something. Uh, Virginia is just. I mean, unless you have Aang in the deck, realistically, you're not doing that. If you're gonna put two people in the deck for that, it's just not worth it. Trophum's always been a meme. Gao's always been a meme, even at 2 cost. Logan, I mean, if you want to just be a gambler, then by all means, you know. Gamba for that 1 KAS, good luck to you. But realistically, you're just going to get outranged, out damage, and no defense buffs. Uh, all, uh, all Hollandy, huh? Definitely usable. I mean, if you want to see gameplay of it being used, then definitely go watch some newer videos, and you'll probably end up seeing all Hog in there. Realistically, I'd probably just use a Bizu over her, but Hog also has the skill of taking 1/16 of the damage, I believe it is, once they go into their just a mobile form. So you can make the argument for that. Also, she's 1 less cost than Abisu. So you can make that argument. Apparently, all Rolo gets buffed at some point. I don't 100% remember the buff, but I want to use her at this point, especially at 4 cost. Hatsan, good joke. Amaretha, if you have her built, is viable. You can throw her in the deck. She's got the overshield. She's got the AS that does AoE and a ton of damage. But she still also doesn't have things like block pierce or invincibility pierce, so you will suffer in that regard. Aura's gonna hate that, but alt Han is still better than regular Han, but I still want to use them. Blind is still only 50-50. Para is still only 50-50. It's just nah. Mel, it just, again, just nah. Even at 3 cost, I mean, you're blinding somebody for 3 cost. No, thank you. Theo, nobody uses him. Pit, I mean, at 4 cost, you may as well use Karen. At least you get a tank out of it, and you still get quick. Zactyl, I don't see anybody use them. I think maybe Mel uses them, maybe, if that, but realistically not. Clevis, no. Piet, no. Jillian, no. Geezer, no. Neural, not at this point. Warwick, regular Warwick, no. All Warwick, oh, absolutely. Regular Warwick, no. Smokey, no. Maki, no. Eduardo, yeah, that's a good joke. Oh, my crystals could take 3 hits. Nobody can overcome this at this point. Yeah, okay, sure. More aliens, good jokes. Dagogi is just, I mean, there's just so many better fire DPS, your 5 cost, your melee range. You do restrict, right? You do restrict, but other than that, realistically, you're not really going to be using him like that. I'm pretty sure the only one that really had him built was like Serb. And, well, that's all the units. A little bit of a rush towards the end, but realistically, at that point, we were getting to units that people realistically don't use in duels. But, yeah, that's a way that you can build out some of these decks. Have 2 to 3 regular beasts, I would say, in the fact of something like Pelico Tarantula and Echo Nut. So that way you can run through your deck real quick to find the units that you want for a relatively low cost, as well as them being tanky enough to take hits and pay off their own cost, whether that be eating AS for your towers or your characters instead of your characters dying when they're 5 cost and your beast is 1 or 2. So that's why you'd have beast in the deck like that. Realistically, looking at our deck right now, I mean, if we're gonna assume that LBs and gear are all like 666 and realistic LBs for the level that you're at here, I mean, you gotta make a deck like this work. Siv's strong enough. Arbo's still Arbo. Alt Lily can kill people with the mirrored debuff. Priya can bomb the annoying units that are going to sit across the map from you. Alfaro, you got a 50-50 chance of insta-killing people while also going invisible and trolling people like that between the poison, the slow, and the cooldown you get, I think, from his 6-star gear. Potentially lining you up for another insta-kill attempt, as well as power gathering. And then you have a Metro with his invincibility to where you can just plop him down and have him use insta AS if the enemy that's running towards you doesn't have invincibility pierce. You're gonna just sit there and CC them out for the most part. You may not necessarily kill, but between the stun, the confusion, and having invincibility yourself, you're relatively safe from that regard. So there's that. Maybe not necessarily the video people were looking for, but I sat down and did, and hopefully you guys enjoy this relatively in-depth look at the building of a deck. Other than that, I appreciate you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next. See you.